Look at your phone right now. Your calendar app is like probably a battlefield of color-coded stress, um, deadlines, meetings, fiscal quarters, just an endless stream of notifications.
Oh, absolutely. It never really stops.
Right. It's like we've designed our relationship with time to just extract as much labor from ourselves as physically possible. But what if a calendar wasn't built for production?
Mm.
What if instead it was engineered to remind you of your core identity? Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
And in the spirit of today's topic, which revolves entirely around the concept of sacred intentional rest, I want to start by offering a genuine divine blessing over you, the listener.
That's a beautiful way to start.
Yeah. I pray for blessings over your day today and over your entire week. May you find moments of actual restorative peace. Because today, we are taking a massive step back in time.
A huge step back.
We're exploring Leviticus chapter 23, and we're utilizing some really extensive notes from the Holman and NAA Study Bibles.
Which are incredible resources, by the way. They give us all that deep historical and cultural context.
They really do.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to look at this text not as, a dry list of ancient rules.
Yeah.
We want to see it as the ultimate divine calendar app for ancient Israel.
I love that analogy because the historical context here completely shifts our modern paradigm of time management. I mean, in our modern framework, time is money.
Right. Time is literally currency.
Exactly. But in the ancient Near Eastern context we're looking at, time was a canvas for relationship building. The overarching term used throughout the text is holy convocations.
And looking at the linguistic breakdown in the source notes, holy comes from the Hebrew word kodesh, meaning set apart.
Yes, set apart or separated.
And a convocation is a gathering. So a holy convocation isn't just like a random day off. It feels more like an engineered interruption.
Engineered interruption, that is a highly accurate way to describe it.
The community basically had to hit pause on the daily grind and focus on Yahweh's provision.
They did. You have to remember, in an agrarian society, the daily labor required just to survive was immense. The text commands them to step away from that.
Which brings us to the most frequent interruption in this system, the weekly Sabbath.
Right, the baseline of the whole calendar.
The study notes point out that the Hebrew root shaveth literally means to rest or cease.
Okay.
And I want to dig into the psychology of this a bit.
Sure, let's unpack it.
We romanticize the idea of a day of rest today, like, a spa day or sleeping in. But for an ancient farmer, where survival dictates that you work the land constantly, taking a full day off seems terrifying.
Oh, it's incredibly dangerous, economically speaking.
Exactly. You're leaving your crops to the elements for 24 hours. So how does establishing a weekly rhythm of ceasing set the psychological stage for all the other massive annual festivals?
Well, the vulnerability is the entire point. What the Sabbath does systematically is force the individual to confront their own limitations. By mandating a total cessation of work every seventh day and rooting this all the way back to the creation story, it establishes a baseline of trust. It's a constant reminder that their time belongs to God.
Wow. So it functions like a weekly trust fall.
Yes.
You stop spinning the plates, and you just watch to see if the world crashes down. And when it doesn't, you realize you aren't the one holding the universe together.
That's a great way to put it. And building that psychological muscle memory week after week sets the stage for everything else. Once that rhythm is secure, the calendar scales up.
Starting in the spring, right, with the first month, Nisan, which is around March or April for us.
Exactly. On the 14th day of that month, the calendar hits Passover, commemorating their liberation from Egypt.
And then immediately following Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. And here is where the text gets incredibly specific, almost rigid.
It really does.
For a whole week, they are forbidden from eating or even having yeast in their houses. Now, the historical story is that they were fleeing Egypt and didn't have time to let the dough rise.
Yeah. Right, a hasty exit.
But I have to push back a little here. Is there a deeper symbolic reason the text is so strict about zero yeast for a whole week? It feels like more than just a history lesson.
Oh, it absolutely is. The scholarly notes from both the Holman and NAA Bibles strongly support that there's a vital theological layer here. In the ancient world, yeast or leaven was a symbol of corruption.
Okay, because of how it spreads.
Yes. Think about the physical mechanics of it. It alters whatever it touches. It ferments and puffs up the dough.
Like an infection.
Exactly. So by purging it, the Israelites weren't just pantomiming their escape. They were physically acting out a spiritual cleansing of sin.
Oh.
They were demonstrating a clean break from their old life of slavery. And the source notes also draw a line straight to the New Testament, identifying Jesus as the ultimate Passover lamb.
So you're literally digesting your history. Your diet is stripped down to physically remind you of the cost of freedom.
Right.
Now, as we move forward, there's a big shift. We transition from liberation to stepping into the promised land, where they experience God's provision through agriculture.
Yes, we move to the first fruits.
Right, as premishes. If we look at the translation roots, it's the ritual of bringing a single sheaf of the very first harvest to the priest to be waved before the Lord.
Which, again, requires immense faith. You're handing over the first yield before the rest is secure.
It's a physical acknowledgement that God provided the crop. You planted it, but you didn't make it rain.
Precisely. And the study material notes a striking prophetic parallel here, too. The New Testament actually describes the resurrected Christ as the first fruits of those who have died.
Meaning he's the guarantee of a larger harvest to come.
Exactly. The local agrarian reality pointed toward a massive cosmic promise.
That's fascinating. And that single sheaf basically sets a timer, right? Because exactly 50 days or 7 weeks later, we hit the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost.
Yes, Pentecost celebrates the actual culmination of the grain harvest. The storehouses are getting full.
But wait, here is a fascinating contradiction in the text that I need you to unpack.
Okay, what is it?
For the Feast of Unleavened Bread, yeast was strictly forbidden, the ultimate symbol of corruption. But for Pentecost, Leviticus explicitly commands bringing 2 loaves of bread baked with yeast.
Right.
Why do the rules suddenly flip? If yeast is the enemy in the spring, why is it commanded in the summer?
It's a great question, and the paradox resolves beautifully when you look at the psychological progression. Unleavened bread was about a radical break from a corrupt past.
You strip everything down to the essentials.
Exactly. But Pentecost is not about escaping. It celebrates arriving. It's the abundance of everyday life, and normal, nourishing bread in the ancient world was leaven.
Oh, I see. So it's acknowledging God as the provider of normal, everyday sustenance.
Yes. The divine presence isn't just in miraculous escapes. It's in the daily grind. The study notes also mention this festival is tied to the giving of the law at Mount Sinai.
So physical provision aligns with spiritual provision.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And speaking of everyday life, there's a detail right in the middle of these Pentecost instructions that it blew my mind.
Gleaning laws.
Yes. Leviticus 23, verse 22. Right while they're celebrating this massive harvest, God commands them not to harvest the edges of their fields, and they can't pick up dropped grain.
They have to just leave it.
It's a built-in welfare system. It forces a pause on optimization, which is so counter to how we live today.
It really is. And the so what here for the listener is profound. The text explicitly says those edges belong to the poor and the foreigner.
Wow.
True celebration of God's provision is completely incomplete without caring for the vulnerable. In this calendar, religion and social justice were inseparable.
So if you harvest every last stalk for yourself, your worship is basically fraudulent.
Exactly.
That is a massive challenge for us today. Okay, let's shift to the autumn rhythms. The 7th month, Tishrei, which is September or October.
Yeah.
The vibe changes completely here, right?
It does. We move from the physical harvest to intense spiritual reflection.
Starting with the Feast of Trumpets on the first day of the month. The notes say this later became associated with Rosh Hashanah, the civil new year.
Yes, and the defining feature is the blowing of trumpets.
Yeah.
The Hebrew word is teruah.
Which means a loud shout or blast, right?
Right. It's a jarring alarm to wake up and prepare spiritually. You've been focused on physical wealth all summer, and the trumpet jolts you out of that complacency.
It's an alarm clock for the soul, because just 10 days later is the most serious day of the year, the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur.
The only festival where they are explicitly commanded to afflict their souls.
Which the notes say means fasting, right?
Yes, complete fasting.
Okay.
A day of deep mourning over moral failure.
It's like an annual, highly intense spiritual audit for the entire nation. The high priest makes atonement for everyone's collective sins. And if you didn't participate, if you didn't fast, you were cut off from the people.
Exiled. The severity shows how serious moral pollution was to the community. They had to face the darkest parts of themselves to get a clean slate.
But then, God doesn't just leave them in that heavy, depressed state. This is my favorite part of the calendar's emotional engineering. Just 5 days after that intense fasting, they throw a massive 7-day camping trip.
The Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot.
Right. They're commanded to build temporary booths out of palm fronds and leafy branches and literally live in them.
The emotional shift is wild. They go straight from weeping over their sins into this joyful, vibrant celebration.
But why live in flimsy branch huts at the height of their autumn wealth? It seems so random.
Well, the text gives the reason. It was a physical, visceral way to ensure every generation remembered their ancestors' 40-year wandering in the desert.
Oh, to remember when they had nothing.
Exactly. When you live in a solid house with a full barn, you think, I did this. I'm self-sufficient. But living in a temporary booth strips away that hubris. It reminds them of God's faithful protection when they were completely vulnerable nomads.
That is just brilliant. It's forced institutional memory.
It is.
So, to summarize the brilliance of Leviticus 23, it wasn't just a schedule. It was an immersive, year-round educational system.
Completely immersive.
It used food, camping, rest, and community charity to teach theology. It engaged all the senses.
It's a masterpiece of sociological engineering.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Our modern calendars are almost entirely organized around productivity, deadlines, and fiscal quarters. We are constantly extracting labor. But what would your year look like if you deliberately scheduled your time around rhythms of forced rest? What if you build in active gratitude, reflection, and dedicated margins for community care? How would that change the trajectory of your life?
It's a profound question. We need those margins to remember who we actually are.
We absolutely do. Well, we are wrapping up this deep dive now, and I want to explicitly say goodbye by stating that God blesses all the listeners.
Thank you for joining us.
May that blessing follow you as you step back into the rhythms of your own life. Catch you on the next one.